If you have questions during this presentation, please add them to the chat with your contact information in case we need to get clarification from you so we can provide a response. This webinar will be recorded. All audience participants will be muted, and also please turn off your video. We will have staff from Workforce Board Service Strategies, Workforce Policy, and Workforce Board Grants that will be monitoring the chat and be available to respond to questions. After TWC has responses for all questions, a Q&A will be made available. Once again, please use the chat feature to ask questions. When submitting questions, include your contact information, such as an email address, in case TW staff need to get in contact with you to further understand your question. Let's begin. Incumbent Worker Training through WIOA. Today's topics include Incumbent Worker Training, an overview. Borderplex will discuss their IWT program. Capital Area will also discuss their IWT program, and we will answer questions. What is Incumbent Worker Training? IWT is designed to meet the needs of an employer or group of employers to retain a skilled workforce or avert layoffs. IWT can be used to either help prevent potential layoffs of employees or obtain the skills necessary to retain employment, such as increasing the skill levels of employees so they can be promoted within the company and create backfill opportunities for less skilled employees. Employer eligibility. The employer or group of employers must be eligible to receive incumbent worker training services. The board determines if the employer or group of employers is eligible. To be determined eligible, the employer must have a TWC tax account number with the status of active and liable, and must have an employer account in workintexas.com with the same TWC tax account number. Boards must consider the following when determining employer eligibility: the characteristics of the individual in the program and the ability of the training to increase the competitiveness of an employee and an employer. Other factors that the board determines appropriate, which may include the number of employees being trained, the wages and benefits, including post-training wage increases anticipated upon completion of training, and the existence of other training and advancement opportunities provided by the employer. Non-federal share of cost. Employers participating in IWT are required to pay a portion of the cost of providing training to their incumbent workers. This is called the non-federal share of cost. Boards must use the criteria and considerations set forth in WD Letter 06-19 to determine the non-federal share of cost. Employee or participant eligibility. An individual does not have to meet the WIOA adult eligibility requirements to receive incumbent worker training from his or her employer. If an individual meets the eligibility requirements for the WIOA adult program, he or she may be enrolled. However, enrollment in the WIOA adult program is not required for participation in IWT. Boards must establish policies and definitions to determine which workers are eligible for IWT services. To qualify as an incumbent worker, the incumbent worker must be employed, meet the Fair Labor Standards Act requirements for an employer-employee relationship, and have an established employment history with the employer for 6 months or more. Exceptions apply when training is provided to 2 or more employees in the same cohort. WD letter 06-19 provides additional information on exception to established employment history. Board expenditure limits. Board expenditure is capped at 20% of their total WIOA adult and dislocated worker formula allocation to provide incumbent worker training. Boards must ensure that the incumbent worker training cost per participant is reasonable and necessary to complete the course of study, and boards must identify and document the methodology and factors used in making the reasonableness determination. Data tracking. The incumbent worker training tracking tool sent by the assigned grant manager must be used to document incumbent worker training for individual incumbent workers and cohorts, the cost of training and training outcomes. The incumbent worker training tracking tool is in the attachment 1 of WD letter 0619. Boards planning to provide incumbent worker training services must coordinate such activities with their assigned board grant manager and complete the notification form for incumbent worker training following the instructions on the form. The notification form for incumbent worker training is in attachment 2 of WD letter 0619. Data reporting. Periodic reporting by the board is required. Reporting is done by submitting an updated incumbent worker training tracking tool to the assigned board grant manager. The completed tracking tool must be submitted within 20 days of the end of each reporting quarter. Workforce Solutions Office staff must enter the incumbent worker training service in workintexas.com for the employer. That concludes just the overview of incumbent worker training. This information can be found in WD letter 06-19. Up next is a presentation from Borderplex. They will discuss their incumbent worker training program.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my team and I are going to talk about our strategy. So as soon as we can get that slide deck up, I'll go through a couple slides and then we'll go through our strategies and how we're using incumbent worker. Jeanette, are you able to share? Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, my name is Anne Miranda. I'm the Workforce Development Director. Nick Muniz is our program specialist. He is not able to attend today. But also on the presentation, we have Denise Arieta. She's our business services manager with our contractor. And Ms. Jeanette Alvarado is a specialist with our organizational effectiveness department. Next slide, please. So we're going to go over our board strategy, some demographics, some data that we pull that maybe you all might be interested in looking at as part of a strategy. Just really who our workforce is at a glance. And in that data, we also have our business composition. And then Denise can talk about our business approach. And if you have any questions on our experience in pushing these requests for incumbent worker training contracts through TWC, Jeanette can talk about that a little bit. Next slide. And please let me know if I'm going too fast or if I need to change if it's loud enough. So first and foremost, what we wanted to kind of share with you is we really do delve into a lot of data. And so I think it's really important to kind of know who our workforce is at and what those employed population demographics look like. So you can see here, obviously we look at the gender We're looking at age, and you can see in our region, the majority of our workforce is between ages 25 to 54, and then we've got some 55 to 64-year-olds. And so for that, that's really, really compelling, because we know as we're trying to skill up individuals, we know that this is a group that has a lot of potential, but is probably working. And then we start kind of thinking about, they have family commitments, obligation commitments. So this is where incumbent worker training really kind of does start to make more sense as a strategy to scale up our workforce. The other thing that we wanted to point out here is regarding education levels. So the majority of our population actually has high school and some college, which is really important also, because when we're looking at, that's 46.9% of our population, and this is a really good opportunity for us to address the skills gap, right? So we know this is where incumbent worker training can be a big benefit, because they might not necessarily have the time to go back to formal institutions for higher education or post-secondary. And again, this is just kind of one of those strategies that we try to look at and understand who our employed population is. Next slide. This one is also really telling. So the reason we really want to focus on skilling up is because we also look at everybody who's working falls in with these, what we call wage quartiles. So there's 4 of them, and you can see that between the 2 bottom wage quartiles, that's where most of our people are working. That's the majority of our workforce. So you're looking at 38% in the second lowest quartile and 31%. That's really impactful, because if you look at the wages that they're making, we know that they're not making a living wage. And so it's really important for us from an economic development perspective to try to scale up and provide those training opportunities for this workforce. Again, this isn't an IT or anything like that, but this is where the strategy of incumbent worker training can really become a benefit. And it's just it makes it a little bit more accessible to train up this workforce that we're looking at here. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. Wait, if you can go back. Sorry, Jeanette. Something I also wanted to point out, when we looked at with COVID and the amount of UI claimants, you can see that most of the claimants in our region fell into these 2 wage quartiles, 45% and 35%. So from a stability standpoint, a productivity standpoint, and just everything that we're looking at, that this is our most vulnerable population. Now, going back to the previous slides, if we're already working and not making a living wage, and probably falling with that category of having family and obligation, it's going to be a really hard sell to get them to go back just to school for the sake of going back to school. So embedding the training with the employer it's a win-win situation for the employer and the individual. Next slide. So one of the things that we're looking also here is, again, just with that data, this is to kind of summarize everything, is we're looking at our underemployed workforce opportunities. We know that employers are really having a hard time right now in attraction and finding employers. And what the conversation that we're having with employers, and Denise will get into this a little bit more, is if you're able to find somebody who you think can work hard, they might not have the skill sets that you need right now, but this is where the selling point of incumbent worker training for employers really can make a difference. So in our region, we have over 300,000 employees in the workforce. Out of that, we have 48,000 that have high school but are making below the living wage. And then even further, 36,000 of those have some college and are earning the living wage. And we've got a really great data and we can kind of show you how, if anybody's interested, how we break that down. But it was really an eye-opener for us to see that we've got people who are over the age of 25 working in fast food counter jobs with some college. And the numbers were really, really big. So again, when we're talking about the middle skills gap, the needs of employers, this is just a really good talent pool to look at. Next slide. And then I'll go over this and then I'll pass it on to Denise, and then Jeanette can answer any processing questions. So the business composition is also really big for us to look at it, because we know that if you look here at this pie graph, most of our employers are micro small employers. The majority in our region, 94% of our employers are small employers for 50 or less. But if we really kind of do a deeper dive, and when we're talking micro small, 1 to 4 employees is 44%, 17, 5 to 9, 11, 10 to 19 employers. These are small employers who don't necessarily have the resources to integrate training for their staff. And so what we're trying to do is really kind of help the employers not only stabilize and grow and help them just kind of sustain, but this is again like that selling point that we have with the employer, that it's worthwhile for them to utilize these resources such as incumbent worker training, because we can help with those associated costs. And we've just, it's been a really good process so far. And as a strategy for our board of directors and our CEO have committed that we will try to utilize the allotted amount for WIOA to do incumbent worker training. During COVID, our focus was very much on the individual, but as part of our economic recovery strategy here at the Borderplex area, we're really hyper focused on employers. And that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Denise.
Thank you, Alma. Next slide, Jeanette. Thank you. So for us on the business services side, we have shifted to a consultative approach. What we want to do with each business is, talk about what are your needs overall. One of the biggest things that we have, again, is shifting to the consultative approach, talking to the business about, what are your needs? How can we help you? Talking to what Alma said, is there an opportunity for you to upskill the current staff that you have? If you need, some more specialized trained person that you've already been working with and you think that you can upskill that person, that's definitely where we want to focus. And so we talk to them about their different options. We talk about, different grants or assistance that's available to them, and we identify what best fits their needs based on what they're trying to accomplish. So for example, if we get a business who is looking to get into, the federal contracting world, which was one of the cases that we had, he was looking to upskill his staff in certain training. And so we sit down, we talk about what type of training are you looking for? How is that going to benefit the business? And how does that also benefit your employees? With the expansion, being able to, with this particular employer, they were able to obtain 3 different certifications, and that was able to elevate their credibility and their credentials within the industry. The way that, other businesses or contracts were perceived was elevated. So he was really grateful for it. So what we want to do with them again is we talk to them, the consultative approach, talk about what is the company trying to accomplish? What are your needs? How can we help alleviate that with, incumbent worker training or any other funding source? And then once we decide on, yes, this is the route to go, we want to make sure that we discuss what is needed from the business and what's the commitment from us. So we talk about, what type of training, who are the training providers, what are going to be the next steps, outlining the process for the employer to make sure that they're understanding their commitment, that they understand our commitment, and then outline the steps, submit it to TWC, and then of course establish that we follow up with them periodically to make sure that we're on track.
Denise, if I can just add really quick before you move on. One of the benefits, so for example, sometimes the employers know exactly which training provider offers what they're looking for. And so we just need to make sure, through our procurement that is the most appropriate training. But sometimes they're very specific for what they're looking for. So it really wasn't that complicated as far as the work behind it. Now, granted, we might have an employer who has no idea who can provide the training, and then we'll use our resources through our training providers and look at that. But we had an employer who had, for example, had bought us a specific machine. They were a small manufacturing company. That machine, that training was very costly for them to have somebody actually provide that training. But the company that created that machine had their own proprietary training, and we were able to get incumbent worker. We were able to be quite actually easily approved to do incumbent worker training for that one employer with that proprietary training, very specific to that machine. So I saw on the chat, like, do we have to go through the community colleges like your typical SDF? No, we have not had to do that. We always compare because it's important to see what resources the community colleges have, but it's not restricted to that.
Does anybody have any questions?
If you just want to kind of talk about like the time frame from when we first got the information from the employer and how you submitted that to TWC.
Yeah,
And then
so
sorry, Jeanette, there's also a question about the approval process, if it's a approval process or a review process and the turnaround time.
yes, so what I've experienced, we work with Tangela Neiman, and she's our incumbent worker manager. And the turnaround time is pretty quick. It usually is 1 week with her, but of course we work with the employer for about a month or less. So one thing that from our experience, it's a pretty fast process. So let me see another question. You guys see? So yeah, it's pretty fast and a very fast turnaround time. So I would say 1 week or 2 weeks. And what happens after that is they send you the data tracker. They give you a unique number, and that's how you go ahead and communicate with the employer with the information that is needed, because there's information such as social security's numbers and the employee name and things like that. So it goes further in the WD letter of what's required from the employer. Yes, they do require the TWC approval prior to proceeding. We do work with the employer first off to see if that's the route that we want to take, and then we go ahead and approach our TWC and ask for approval, and that's pretty quick. It's a one-pager. We just go ahead and enter what the training is for, how many people, and things like that, and additional information. And I think you could find that in the WD letter as well. Yes. Is there any other questions before I pass it along? I'll go ahead and stop sharing my screen.
And hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Good. This is Joel Mullins from Workforce Policy. I just wanted to jump in real quick and answer that question about whether it's a TWC approval or review. Yeah, I mean, it's not, I wouldn't really call it an approval per se. I mean, we need to be able to assign a cohort ID number for you guys to use in that tracking tool. So that's the main reason that we need you to reach out to us before starting one of these. I'm sure we're also probably just, checking that the I's are dotted and T's are crossed and all that to make sure that all the requirements are met. But as long as that's the case, then there's not going to be a problem. I mean, we definitely think this is a great model. We want to encourage it, and yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there.
Thank you, Joel. Borderplex, thank you so much for your presentation. Alma, Denise, and Jeanette, again, thank you. And I'm pretty sure you may get some questions after this presentation, so we will make sure that we have your contact information. Up next is Amber Warren with Capital Area to discuss Capital Area's Incumbent Worker Training Program.
Thanks, Norma. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to share my screen. So my name is Amber Warren. I'm the Director of Upskilling and Advancement with Workforce Solutions Capital Area. I am on our workforce board side and oversee our incumbent worker training programs. Wanted to provide you guys with some information about what we're doing over here in Austin. I loved the data that Alma presented, so I went through in a slide that included some data to justify, upskilling for employers, for the community, why training incumbent workers is really beneficial. In the Austin MSA, our unemployment is 2.9% from December. So a lot of people are working, and the skills gap and mismatch that you can see is really a good justification of why we should look at training incumbent workers, why employers should look at tapping into their existing talent. So from this chart, you can see the high school equivalency. There's a surplus of what would classify as entry-level workers here. And then this next columns for skills training, there's a shortage of workers. There is about 54% of job postings in Texas that are for the middle skilled jobs, and 45% of workers are trained for those positions. So additional training is needed to fill the demand of jobs available. And this is for the state. We look at local data as well and provide that to employers to show them, what that looks like for some of our in-demand industries. So definitely, upskilling can help with moving individuals that are at the high school equivalency level up into, certifications, associate degrees, to be able to fill that skill gap. For our incumbent worker training programs, we currently have 6 that we have conducted. A few of them have completed. Most of them are still ongoing, but we look at, how can we provide this as an opportunity for employers to advance their employees in their careers, or avert layoffs as an option as well. And I wanted to go through, how we're working with these companies and what specifically we're doing. Feel free to add questions in the chat if you have any. This also shows that we're working with different size companies, so large, medium, and small businesses. And the percentage of what we're able to offset is dependent on the company size, which is included in that WD letter. For Ascension CN, they're a large hospital system. They were looking to upskill some of their employees into surge tech roles, which was a critical position that has been in a shortage area for a while now. So we were able to award them. They were our first incumbent worker training grant. The program itself is 2 years. So it takes a little bit of time for them to get through, and our incumbent worker training grants pay as they're completing semesters. So long-term programs, just thinking about, what that looks like for providing reimbursement to the companies, how that justifies for you all, as well as from, your internal accounting team as well. Patients Premier Choice, they're a small home health business, and they are upskilling one of their employees from an LVN to a registered nurse as an associate's degree. So that's another 2-year program that they're working through. Their owner and CEO really wanted to be able to provide the opportunity for professional and financial growth to their employees. Home health can be a really challenging industry for companies to recruit and retain talent. So being able to give back, providing that education advancement and career growth to their employees really helps to justify, sticking around with the company. And it also increases the quality of care to their patients as well by providing more skilled workforce. Arrive Logistics, we connected with during COVID. So they were really looking for training to help increase the skills and operations as the workload shifted during the pandemic. So they did a number of different trainings, including Excel training, Six Sigma, project management, and more. That is a project where we had varying different trainings added to it. So that can be a little more to manage when it comes to like the reporting document. Some employees were taking more than one training, so their name and contact information is listed on that reporting document more than once. So that's something to consider as you're developing what this program could look like for you all. American Youth Works was also a company that we worked with as COVID first hit, and they really wanted to use this as a way to avert layoffs for their employees, to be able to advance their skills so that they could do more within the organization. They're a nonprofit that provides career training to youth. So it was really beneficial and like rewarding for our community to be able to skill up their employees so that they can in turn train more of the workforce and advance them as well. Austin Western Railroad Company, they really embraced this career ladder approach to their engineers, and were able to provide a varying different trainings to their employees so that they can advance within their company. This really helped with filling some of their roles as well. Transportation can also be a tricky industry to get people interested in and retaining talent. So them being able to advance their internal workers was a real benefit for them. And then Inspire Beauty, we also connected with during the pandemic, and they wanted to look at a way to avert layoffs by increasing a specific service that their company was able to provide. I think it was like microblading or something like that. So they went to training, they trained their employees to be able to increase their business operations and really help their company stay afloat during the pandemic. And I have a quote from our Patients Premier Choice that emphasizes, looking at small businesses. I think a lot of times companies will ask, well, sure, like Ascension Seton as a hospital with thousands of employees in a corporate organization can upskill and provide this type of training. But me as a small business, how am I supposed to do it? How do I get resources to do that? But it really does act as a benefit for small businesses to be able to advance their employees. It can also help in the terms of like business approaches. So looking at like Excel training or accounting training can help them, or even web development in terms of like expanding their business online presence. So it really can be a benefit and way for small businesses to utilize too. So it's helpful to be able to work and understand, what their business needs are, so that they can approach it. Of course, there's things to consider from the employer aspect of, the changing schedules so that my employee can go to school and maybe work part-time so they still have income coming in and supporting them. So there's various things that need to be considered, and I have a slide later that will go into some of those details. We did a success story, so I have a link down there if you guys want to read more about Patients Premier Choice. I wanted to go into some of the application development that we've done. There doesn't need to be a formal procurement when using Incumbent Worker Training, which is really beneficial. The employer is allowed to choose the training provider of their choice, and we have an application for the employer to submit where we take into consideration, what is the cost? What are the employees benefiting out of it? Does it meet the requirements to utilize the training, and things like that? And we've gone through a few different iterations to see what the best approach is for companies to apply. The first iteration that we had was this employer recruitment, where we went out to the employer partners we worked very closely with, being Ascension Seton as one of them, to identify companies that we wanted to be able to do a program with and see how it worked. We also shared it with the chambers, economic development, and other business associations to kind of get the word out, so they could let employers know that this was an opportunity for them. This worked well because we knew and had a relationship with the companies that we were looking to utilize this program with. So I would recommend it. The other iteration that we did was a competitive RFA that we opened as a procurement. We had done an email blast to our company contacts, as well as putting it on the Texas Smart Buy website. We also updated the application itself, and I modified it to replicate or kind of mirror some of the questions or requirements for the SDF application, so that when companies applied, if it wasn't a good fit for incumbent worker training, we could suggest that they look at utilizing SDF as well. This also allowed us to make it a little more similar. So if companies had worked with SDF before, they would be able to use that too. And to clarify, that modification was for the new SDF application that they recently had updated. We're now in this third iteration of an open application that's online that employers can just apply to as available. I'm having it open until April this year. And that's on our website. I can drop a link in the chat, but I have the link at the bottom of the slide here if you want to take a look at it. And that has been email blasted to companies. We're sharing it with chambers, economic development, and business associations. For this application, I've made it a smaller amount so that it's targeting more rapid programs, so that we're not having, the 2-year programs that I had described can be challenging in terms of payment and completion and things like that. But more to just get quick training for employees to be able to advance in their career. And then we have a scoring to determine, what we're looking for specifically in these types of applications. And the other considerations I've been talking about, the length of the program, the number of trainings that they're doing, and then making sure that their tracking and reporting is being done, and that the employer can provide that information to us. From lessons learned, I would say the open application in conjunction with employer recruitment, working with our business solutions team, we're able to use those relationships that they have and understand the open positions that they're looking to fill, and talk about, is incumbent worker training and upskilling a good fit for them? So that's really beneficial as well. In terms of company considerations for upskilling, training an incumbent worker, there can be a lot of barriers. We do look at, is it an option for us to co-enroll with WIOA so that we can provide any sort of support services, whether that be, uniforms or transportation. I'm sure you guys all know and leverage that as well. But thinking about, how do we support first generation professionals to advance in their career out of entry-level roles into middle and upper level positions. Thinking about this from an equity lens, what are some of the barriers that they might be facing, and how can we make sure that they're successful, and how can the company provide that type of support, whether that be a flexible schedule for them or providing any sort of additional assistance, paying them while they're going to the training, allowing them to do it during the working hours, things like that. Additionally, transparency of programs and resources. We did a survey with the Graduate Network a few years ago that really showed that a lot of employees are unaware of resources like tuition assistance or even professional development in terms of on-the-job training or career coaching to be able to advance in their careers. So making sure that employers are letting their staff know that opportunities like this is available, and thinking about how they can use their existing staff to fill some of those harder to fill positions that they might be struggling with. They're already pre-vetted talent that they know they have those foundational and soft skills, and they can really cultivate and develop that employee the way that they want. This can include, making sure that the communication is informal and informal, and then thinking about employer resource groups that can help influence that as well. And minimizing corporate jargon. And all of these talking points here have come from this article that's linked at the bottom, that I would encourage you all to look at in terms of how can we make it more equitable and easier for individuals to be able to advance in their careers. Lastly, I wanted to share a couple resources that we've developed. I think upskilling is something that's growing a lot, especially with the pandemic. People are realizing that they have to upskill or reskill, and employers are recognizing that as well. We've developed an employer-specific toolkit to be able to see different methods of upskilling, including apprenticeship, and give some examples of what that looks like, so that they can really start diving into like, how can I implement this in my own business? In addition, we've also looked to develop, I don't know if this is going to start playing. This is a video for our Upskilling Heroes. We have a survey that lets us collect information on employers that are upskilling within the Austin community and be able to highlight and really present the company as an employer that is working to cultivate and develop their workforce. One, so that it provides advertisement for the company and people start thinking about this lifelong learning, or how can I look at leveraging tuition assistance or other resources that my employers might have to avoid debt or advance in their careers. So these are our Upskilling Heroes from 2021. Our 2020 Upskilling Heroes were actually the companies that were using the Incumbent Worker Training at the time. So if you go to our YouTube, we have a video for them as well, so you can hear a little bit of feedback from those individuals too. I won't play this video, but if you guys want to look at it, it's linked in the PowerPoint so that you can access it later. So yeah, if you guys have any questions, I'll open up the chat and see if I can answer them. Yes, so I have, I think you can probably still see my screen. On our webpage, we have updated our employer services. I hope you can see my screen. Let me stop and reshare just to make sure. Okay, we've updated our employer resources to really bucket, the areas that we're targeting in, and we've made a call out for the Incumbent Worker Training application, which leads to this blog post. I'll drop it in the chat for you, but it has the full application, so you guys can look at that. Feel free to utilize it, copy it as much as you want. And if you guys have questions, feel free to reach out to me about it. But it goes into detail of like, what are the business requirements that we have, things like that. What does the award look like? And then down here is where the application really begins. Part of it was from another state's Incumbent Worker Training application that we took. And then the bottom half really encompasses what the Skills Development Fund application collects. And this helps us determine, what type of training is being done, what are the outcomes that we're going to see from the training as well. Additionally, here's the success story from Patients Premier Choice that you guys can read about. And then, as I mentioned, we're trying to make upskilling like a prestigious solution for companies. So this is our Upskilling Heroes webpage that goes into the survey, as well as the award that we're offering. That's a good question on if cities, counties, nonprofits are eligible. I don't know about like governmental entities. I know I've asked TWC about that before, but maybe they can provide some guidance on that question for policy. It is possible to target childcare providers for this to upskill workers. So I think that is a good approach. I know like childcare or education can be challenging for recruiting and retaining talent as well. So upskilling can definitely be a good approach for that in terms of like getting people certified. I know that TWC has worked with one of the boards, forgive me, I don't remember which one, but on developing a childcare apprenticeship program specific to helping with upskilling. So utilizing a same principle to that would probably be really beneficial. The scoring tool is also in the application too, so you can, it's not a scoring tool, but it outlines, what we're scoring on. For the completion of the application in the first iteration of what we did help and walk through what that application process would look like. So when we were recruiting employers directly, the second iteration was a very quick RFA, and we didn't assist companies directly because it was competitive, a competitive procurement. In this third iteration of just having this open application online, I imagine we will be more willing to help employers with the process of completing the application and what that looks like. I liked Borderplex, how you guys talked about that consultative approach with the company. So we try to do that as well, and identify and look at, you know, what are your needs, how can this work for your business, and really outline that so that they're successful. Okay, thanks everybody. If you guys have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you, Amber. Really appreciate the information you shared with everybody. In the chat, are there any questions that policy can respond to now?
So I've got some notes here, and I just wanted to make sure on a few of these that we've got these collected. It looks like the procurement question may have been answered by Capital for Lori. Is that correct? Lori, are you comfortable with that answer?
I did a thumbs up, guys. Sorry. I thought this was,
Okay. Yeah, sorry, I missed that. Okay,
but
thank you.
I didn't get an answer on the second part about if you don't spend out the complete grant. So much of what TWC does is tied to expenditure, not allocation. I know the law says allocation. Is there any chance of running into a problem if you spend 20% of the allocation, but do not spend out the grant?
Right, and I've got that. Let me just make sure that I understand it for you, but maybe also for other members on the board. And I'll give you a partial answer, which is I don't believe there is, but I'm going to follow up with our fiscal team and get back to you and anybody else who's interested to make sure that we confirm that. So essentially, you're positing the idea. Let's say a board gets $20 million, so they can spend $4 million on their incumbent worker training. At the end of the year, they've only spent $8 million or $18 million of their allocation, but they spent all $4 million on the IWT. Would they then be out of compliance because they've spent more than the 20% of what was actually expended? Is that your question?
Excellent interpretation, but I wish we had that kind of money and we owe it to toss around. Thank you for that.
Sure. Okay, yeah, we'll follow up. I don't believe there is any issue. The law allows you to reserve up to 20%. And I would phrase it that way as well. I think it's critical for us to start to think about this as up to, not limited to. So you can spend up to 1/5 of your total adult and dislocated worker combined allocation on incumbent worker trainings, this service that's allowable without procurement directly to employers in your region who can benefit from it in order to primarily prevent layoff, but also upskill and train current employees in additional skills so that they can retain their employment, and we expect get higher wages in the process. So important to note there, but I will follow up with you on that piece. Marcia, I believe from Texoma, asked a question about other data entry requirements in TWIST. There are no data entry requirements in TWIST for incumbent worker trainings in general. The only exception to that would be if you choose to enroll the individual training participants in a WIOA adult or dislocated worker program, which is not a requirement of the incumbent worker training model. And then the performance requirement question that Marcia had, are there additional performance requirements, really goes right along with that question about data entry. If you enroll them in your local formula funds, then yes, there would be performance implications. Otherwise, no, this is a direct employer service. So it is not a participant level service unless you choose to essentially co-enroll. And then there was also a question about, can you select the training provider? Again, Capital Area, thank you for, I believe, answering that question. Essentially, no, it's a decision between you and the employer of what the training that is the best fit for their specific needs are. So that could mean it is a local community college. It could mean it's a private training program. I believe it could even mean that it's an in-house training that they have access to through other means. So Marcia, does that answer your questions?
Yes, thank you.
You're very welcome. There was a question about turnaround time. I think we got some examples of that. Definitely the boards on the call can speak much better than I can on that. And I know that Joel, I hope, did a great job of answering the question about whether this is a TWC approval process. And again, just to reiterate that, no, it's not. The only reason we wanted that form on the front end is so that we could assign a cohort number so that we can track it for some federal reporting that we'll have to do. And also so that we can just kind of do a double check, a quick look to ensure that if you have a group of employees, that at least more than 50% of those employees have been employed for 6 months or longer.
Evan, I added in the chat, I think there's a work in Texas requirement to log the service for IWT, but maybe I'm wrong if that's required or not.
I don't believe there is in policy. There is an option, I think, in the work in Texas system where you can track a job opening specifically to an IWT service. But I can check on that as well. And the only other question I saw there was the question about public sector supports. And so WD 1520, which addresses public sector partnerships and their limitations in Texas, specifically calls out that incumbent worker training and customized training, because they are employer services, are forbidden for public sector employers and entities.
This is Alma. I also wanted to add, most of the incumbent worker, well, all of the incumbent worker that we have, training that we have supported, it's really short term and the cost has not been so much. So it's been well under our purchase limit that would prompt us to do a full RFA. So we use just comparative quotes process.
Yeah, and I would say, for those of you that haven't heard it before, I think it's great. The Capital Area is using an altered SDF form. This is another way that I personally like to talk about incumbent worker training, which is that this is like a truly local SDF, right? You have control of the training, you have control of the employers. Again, TWC doesn't do the approvals on these. You've got some very minimal requirements that you need to meet, and then you are able to assist your employers and employees in your local areas.
Are there any other questions in the chat that can be addressed now? I can't see the chats.
Sorry, Norma and Evan, this is Alma again. I really wanted to share with everybody that I know that this has been around for a while. Looking back at how easy the process was and just how easy it was for the employer, I wish we would have started doing them way sooner, because it really is very simplified. We're really gearing up our SDF as well, but this one is just like really low hanging fruit for us. So I just want to thank you for, I want to thank TWC for making that process really streamlined for everybody. Thank you.
Any other questions? We will leave the chat open for a few more minutes. So if you think of something or if you need to contact any of us, please do so. We will provide a Q&A to these questions and also send that out. We will also provide the presentations so boards can have that available if you want to go back and review the presentations today. Thank you.